So should you be hunting with 3.5-inch shotgun shells? I have research and data that gives an answer that you might not expect. Hey, I'm George with the New Hunter's Guide, the YouTube channel and podcast, helping new hunters get started and helping active hunters learn new things. Almost every hunter that I know, myself included, has at one point felt like they needed to be shooting 3.5-inch shotguns in order to be as effective as they could be to take the most game. And why would you think that? Well, it's because of a simple equation that is well marketed. 3.5-inch shells enable you to fire more shot or at a higher velocity or both. And more shot means more pellets in the air, better chance at hitting your target. More velocity means more power on impact and potentially further range. What could be wrong with that, right? That's what's gonna be more effective. On paper, it's a great case. But guys, we don't hunt on paper. We hunt in the real world. And there are more factors than just that. You have recoil, you have muzzle rise, and you have muzzle blast. Now, I looked at several different shotgun loads for 2 3/4-inch shells, 3-inch shells, and 3.5-inch shells. Some of the most common loads out there, from target loads to waterfowl loads to turkey loads to everything in between, and I ran the math on their recoil. And I'm going to throw this chart up. You can see that starting at the 2 3/4-inch shells, you have a certain amount of recoil. That recoil increases substantially to the 3-inch shells, and then it jumps even higher and much higher when you get to the 3.5-inch shells. Now again, there are heavier loads than this. This is just a sample. I just picked a random sample of heavy waterfowl, heavy turkey, and other loads in each category to show you how the recoil scales with all three. Now, when you're talking about rifles, I've got some other data here I'm going to throw up. You can see the average amount of recoil for a 223, a 30-06, 30-30, a 338 Magnum, and you can see how those then stack up against the shotgun recoil. Now, in rifles, anything over 15 pounds of recoil is considered unpleasant. Anything over 20 requires significant training in order to be able to handle effectively. You can see that the shotgun recoil is drastically higher. Now, how can that be? Well, the reason is this. Shotguns fire a much heavier projectile at a slower speed. So the recoil force, the sharpness of it, the recoil backwards correlates to the speed of the projectile going forwards, leaving the barrel. So when a rifle fires a projectile at 3,000 feet per second, it hits you like a sharp crack. When a shotgun fires a much larger projectile at 20 or 1,200 feet per second, it's more like a firm push. So the effect on your body is much more mitigated. The recoil is spread out over time. And when recoil is spread over time, even though it's the same amount of force, it's experienced by the shooter differently. I covered that topic in depth in a video that I did about whether semi-automatic shotguns reduce recoil. I'll link to that at the end of this video if you want more information there. But with a shotgun, because it enables the shooter to absorb that recoil better, we just load the shotgun loads hotter. More shot, more velocity. 3-inch shells isn't enough. Well, let's do 3.5-inch shells so we can fit even more shot, more velocity, and be able to put even more on the target. And while that sounds good, the effects on the shooter are not good. Now, a lot of people just say, well, George, you just need to man up. You just need to toughen up. I am tough enough to be able to shoot the 3.5-inch shells. Listen, guys, your ability to fire 3.5-inch shells without crying is not in question. The physical effects that those magnum loads have on your body and vision, however, are in question. Those cannot be denied. Now, some people think because they're bigger, then they can deal with more recoil. And that is true in a sense. Recoil effect on your body can be mitigated by your bone structure, by the mass of your shoulder. So someone who's taller, who has bigger shoulders, who has more mass, can deal with recoil. They can shoot heavier loads to a similar degree as a smaller person with lighter loads. However, a lot of people think it's based on your weight, and it is not. Someone who's 5'8" that weighs 100 pounds versus 400 pounds is going to experience recoil almost the same. same. You need to have a larger frame. It's all about the size and mass and bone in your shoulder that's going to absorb that recoil. Now, let's get on to the part that you all been waiting for. How does this make you a worse hunter? Well, I didn't say it made you a worse hunter, but it does make you a worse shot. Also, guys, before we move on, I want to let you know that this video is not sponsored. No one is paying for this video, and I've put hours of my own time and energy into the research and prep for this, and I'd ask you to please support the channel by hitting that thumbs up button. Every time you click the like button, you are helping this video and others reach more people and spread to a bigger audience. Almost every professional bird shooter that I know, whether they were full pro, semi-pro, competition, or just shot birds as a way of life, everyone that I personally know, met, have talked to, or been mentored by has stepped down from a 3.5 inch to a 3 inch or a 2 3/4 inch. And the reason is they say they can take more game, more consistently, more effectively, with fewer shells and cleaner kills with the smaller loads. Well, why is that? Well, the reason is this. When you're shooting these massive 3.5 inch loads, you pull that trigger, your whole body is being impacted by that load. Your position is changing. Your on target visual line is changing. The muzzle rise is taking your barrel off target. And then the muzzle flash, whether flash, blast, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes there is brightness involved, not usually anymore, but you've got smoke, you've got powder in the air, and you have a concussive wave that leaves the barrel of the shotgun that can obscure your vision in some of these bigger loads. Couple that with the sound and the effect on your ears, and it can be disorienting to some degree. So what happens is you take that first shot. The second shot is nowhere near as effective as the first shot. You're out of position. You've got to move back. You're somewhat dazed. You're losing time. The game's getting further away. You're not able to get back on target perfectly, so you take a less than perfect shot at a bird that is further away, and your ability to hit those birds on the second and third shot reduce. Now, when it comes to turkey hunting, you can be sitting on the ground. I know someone hunted all their life. They've killed hundreds of turkeys in many states. They would shoot a 3.5 inch shell, and they told me, they said I'd pull that trigger at times and I'd see and hear and feel and be moved and disoriented. I didn't know if I hit the turkey. I didn't know if the turkey's laying on the ground or if the turkey ran or if the turkey flew. It took me a second or two to get my bearings and figure out what happened and what do I do next. All right, guys, no matter how you're hunting or what you're hunting, this can be a biggie. And what most people don't realize is that it also can affect your first shot. When you pull that trigger, when you get used to shooting these bigger loads, it causes a flinch reflex if you have not trained yourself against it. Most shooters this occurs with, unless you have significant training. You go to pull the trigger, and just as you're pulling it, just before, during, or right after, you flinch. You flinch. You move to anticipate the recoil, to absorb it, to help it not hurt or not strike or just not be as big or disorienting. Your body moves and you don't know that you're doing it. Most people, they would swear and cuss and take it to the grave and say, no, I do not flinch when I shoot, but they do. You would have to videotape yourself or have someone else who knows what they're looking for watch you shoot in order to be able to see it, because you don't realize that you're doing it. It's an involuntary reaction, and then it's hidden by the recoil. Much of the time, unless you're very experienced and you've practiced in this area, your first shot is not going to be as effective. And then your second and third shots are going to be much less effective. You can take more birds and be more effective shooting smaller shells, because a 3.5 inch load can have as much as double the recoil. Double. that is massive, and that's also double the muzzle blast and double the muzzle rise. Now, some people will do things to try to mitigate recoil. They will get a semi-automatic shotgun that's able to reduce that recoil some. They'll get a recoil butt plate. They'll get a heavier gun because the weight of the gun does impact felt recoil. Some guns have special mechanisms and things built into them to try and mitigate it. They'll intentionally wear heavier or more padded clothing in order to mitigate that recoil. And they're trying to solve for something that is not really what they think it is. You are better off in most cases, most shooters, with a lighter load, wearing proper clothing. You start messing with clothing, you start messing with position, you mess with your ability to shoot well. You are better off with a lighter load. So what do? Well, if you're on the fence, should I buy a 3.5-inch shotgun and use 3.5-inch shells? This is the advice I would give you guys. No, don't do it. Save your money and buy better ammo and practice more with ammo. All right, if you are shooting steel loads for waterfowl, spend that money on bismuth loads. If you're shooting lead loads for turkeys, upgrade to tungsten loads. You're gonna get more benefit from higher quality ammo than you will from bigger shells that are gonna cause more recoil, muzzle rise, and muzzle blast, which will actually have a negative correlation in most, not all, but in most instances with the average shooter. And if you're already shooting 3.5-inch loads, I want to challenge you to do something. I want you to start keeping your own data. Do a number of hunts. See how many birds per box of shells that you cleanly kill and take home. Then do some hunting with some more average 3-inch shells and see if that number changes. I would suspect that with most hunters, you will do better with the 3-inch shells, taking better shots with better follow-up shots than you will the 3.5-inch shells. And 3.5-inch shells cost more than the alternatives. You spend more money to have more recoil, more muzzle blast, more muzzle rise, and to be a worse shooter in most cases. Now again, this video is targeted towards the average hunter, towards the new hunter, and towards anyone who has not been expertly trained to deal with magnum loads. However, everyone that I personally know who has been expertly trained, who has hunted with magnum loads, has found they are more effective with lighter loads. They are more accurate and able to take home more birds. So what do you do next? Next, you need to click right here and need to watch this video that I did about how semi-automatic shotguns reduce recoil and up your knowledge on this subject. I really appreciate you guys for watching. Till next time, God bless you, and go get 'em in the woods.